Well, Pakistan has been exposed meanwhile and shamed at a global platform once again. The BRICS declaration has condemned the Pak-based terror. The declaration has said that Pak-based terror groups Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Taiba are responsible for terrorism and that the BRICS nations strongly condemn it. The declaration implies that China has been forced to toe India's line on terror. While China has condemned terror, will it now also act against its all-weather ally, Pakistan?
Preventing movement of terrorists, of terror attacks that had taken place, that were deployed all over the world, including in BRICS countries. They called for a comprehensive approach to fight against terrorism. And in countering terrorism, they did refer to radicalization, recruitment, movement of terrorists, blocking terrorist financing, money laundering, supply of weapons and drugs, and countering misuse of internet. There was also a reference to a swift and effective implementation of the UN Security Council resolutions on terrorism, and to make the implementation of the FATF standards on terrorism more effective, and called on states to prevent financing of terrorist networks and terrorist actions from their territories.
President Xi, again for his warm reception and the excellent organization of this summit. Our interaction during the restricted session was constructive. It enriched our mutual understanding and perspectives. After more than a decade of existence, BRICS has developed a robust framework for cooperation. We contribute stability and growth in a world difficultly drifting towards uncertainty. A strong BRICS partnership and innovation, I'm sure, will be instrument for the progress. I'm confident that BRICS will scale new heights of partnership. I thank you.
Well, Strategic Affairs editor Ashish Singh is joining us live for further details. Ashish, this is indeed significant and a big victory for India's diplomacy, isn't it, given the fact that Pakistan has been named and shamed in this terror declaration, and also given the fact that China is a key signatory on this?
Well, that's right. Now, what the Indian government has managed to do is basically for almost a decade, the Indian government has been trying to include Jaish-e-Mohammed's name in the terror list at an international forum, which is specifically shared by China. That is because the Chinese government has been creating the technical hold when the US government proposed at the United Nations to declare Jaish-e-Mohammed, the terror organization which is involved in Pathankot and a few other terror attacks in India, to be declared as an international terrorist, and the Azhar Masood and the Jaish-e-Mohammed as the international terror organizations and the terrorists respectively. What an occasion to do that. See, what the Indian government has been trying to do for last almost a decade, they have managed to do it in China. Basically, this is the BRICS leaders' Xiamen declaration, what I'm holding in my hand. And I would request my cameraman to just zoom in also, if the PCR director can actually play the graphics of this particular declaration, so that our viewers get an exact sense of what is the content of it. Meanwhile, I'll just describe it. This was released, a joint declaration of BRICS by all the leaders just 3 hours ago in Xiamen, where the 9th BRICS meeting is taking place. It's a 23-page document, but the most important part is on the page number 21 and point number 48. I would read this part before I explain it to our viewers. We in this regard express concern on the security situation in region and violence caused by the Taliban, ISIL, Daesh, Al-Qaeda and its affiliates, including Eastern Turkestan Islamic Movement, Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan, the Haqqani Network, Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, TTP and Hizb ut-Tahrir. Jaish-e-Mohammed, as I mentioned, is one organization which is basically Pakistan-sponsored terror organization, which was being shielded by China at the international level. why did India want Jaish-e-Mohammed to be announced and recognized by the United Nations as an international terror organization, or Masood Azhar as an international terrorist? Because once a UN body recognizes and identifies any terror organization or any terrorist, it puts a lot of sanctions on these terror organizations. The terror organization and the chief of such terror organizations come under the radar of international agencies, and also the financial and movement aspects of these terror organizations become curtailed. And that's why the Indian government wanted Jaish-e-Mohammed to be declared as an international terror organization. The Indian government had been approaching, with the help from US government at United Nations. These proposals were passed as well, but it was only and only because China was putting a technical hold, it was not getting through. It was not getting passed in the United Nations. But this change in China's strategy or approach towards Jaish-e-Mohammed is certainly a good news for Indian government. This also indicates how China is changing, or bending rather, with its Pakistan policy. It no more is an all-weather ally. If China, under the pressure from Indian government and a few other top leaders of the world, can bend towards Jaish-e-Mohammed and can actually declare Jaish-e-Mohammed in the joint declaration which is being held in China of BRICS, then certainly the next step would be the practical step. Will China remove its technical hold on UN resolution or US's proposal at UN to declare Jaish-e-Mohammed as an international terror organization? That would be the immediate next step by China. If that happens, it will certainly be a very good news for India. Remember, just a few weeks ago, United States government has announced the other terror organizations, which Hizbul Mujahideen as the international terror organization, and Syed Salahuddin, the chief of Hizbul Mujahideen, as a specially designated global terrorist. Once that is done, it exposes Pakistan, because all these terror organizations, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Hizbul Mujahideen, a large section of Lashkar-e-Taiba, are Pakistan Army and ISI-sponsored terror organization, which basically are in the process of waging war against India, specifically in Kashmir. Uday?
Anshul Anand also joining us. Ashish, stay with us. Anshul, what more can you tell us about the counter-terrorism?
It's a big breakthrough. It's actually more than expected, because the kind of strongly worded this statement is, and there was, mind you, there's been an absolute consensus between all the 5 countries who were on the table today, between the head of the states, clearly indicating and saying and not mincing words that counter-terrorism strategy vis-a-vis all these countries has to be very collective in nature. This is for the first time that the specific terror organizations have been named in a BRICS joint declaration. If you recall BRICS Goa, which happened last year in India, Pakistan was called mothership of terrorism by Indian Prime Minister Mr. Modi, but it wasn't, there was a general strategy mentioned as far as combating terrorism is concerned, but Pakistan wasn't named. This is for the first time, although Pakistan hasn't been named, but yes, the terrorist group which emanate from Pakistan, like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, have been named. So clearly, about the 43 pages of the joint declaration, out of which virtually 2 pages have been contributed to fight against terrorism. Not only has Pakistan been shamed on an international forum, India's stand has been vindicated that Pakistan is an exporter of terrorism, but Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed have been specifically named. Now, till last week, you'd recall, Neha, the Chinese stand has been very clear. It didn't want Pakistan to be named in any which way by India. In fact, it went on to the extent of saying that Pakistan itself is a victim of terror. Now Pakistan, as far as this statement is concerned, clearly indicates it's an exporter of terrorism, and there is nothing known as good terror or bad terror. At least on that, all the 5 countries, all the BRICS nations were on board, including China.
Right. In fact, more reactions are now coming in on this story.
First, we need to seek practical results in our economic cooperation. Results-oriented cooperation is the foundation of BRICS cooperation, and significant progress has been made in this regard. However, we have yet to fully tap the potential of BRICS cooperation.
I think we will be generous enough not to embarrass them in their backyard, in their home, by mentioning Doklam. So I think in the end, it's coming out nicely between India and China as well, as an important step for a larger framework in which there are problems between our two countries. But if we can follow this up with a strategic dialogue or a framework where we address each other's concern, I think that will be a big takeaway from the BRICS Summit and from tomorrow's meeting, which much anticipated meeting between President Xi and Prime Minister Modi.
He now has acquired considerable experience about global fora of this nature. He has consistently drawn attention to terrorism and also given a way out. He has suggested that there should be a certain degree of consensual agreement about the way ahead, and particularly, I think, to quarantine state sponsorship of terrorism. Now, that is going to be, I think, in many ways, the sum and substance, as I see it, of the bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi.